strength and depth, apparently. They have 6,400 other commanders in 12 centers. Centers in North America, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Albania, Kosovo, Algeria, Chechnya, Tajikistan, and the former Soviet republics of Central Asia. The Philippines, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Somalia, just for starters. They have recruitment centers in over 50 countries. And there's a guy by the name of Joseph Bodansky who's written a book, Bin Laden, the man who declared war in America, published in 1999. He's the director of the Congressional Task Force on Terrorism and Unconventional Warfare. He's also the director of the research group at ISSI, one of the major think tanks that deal with these kinds of issues. So this is not some kind of flagrant thing. This is competent. It's a competent book and gripping reading. It's the whole life of Bin Laden and all the background. Let's talk a little bit about we have no idea what the resources are. We know that the Taliban income alone from the drug trade exceeds $8 billion a year. They launder that money through the Russian mafia, giving them a 10 to 15% commission. That gives them an income of over $1 billion per year. And we have no idea how much is involved. We do know it involves dozens of countries throughout the entire world. Well, let's see. Let's keep going here. Where are we heading, and what can we expect? Well, first of all, obviously, we are plunged in global terrorism, and this isn't a kind of thing that we're going to solve by getting eventually, and I'm sure eventually we will, is to get Bin Laden. Many experts think we'll never get him, but I suspect we will. But the real point of all this is even if you do it won't solve anything. There's global terrorism. I'll tell you the good news. It explodes the conspiracy myth. You know, it's fascinating as just a student of American culture to realize how we always attribute whatever catastrophe there is to one lone deranged guy. John Wilkes Booth killed Abraham Lincoln. Except experts today understand that it wasn't John Wilkes Booth that was killed. He got away because he was part of a plot with Seward, the Secretary of War. The historians are having a field day with that because it was a conspiracy too. But nevertheless, as you go right through American history, whether it's John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Bobby Kennedy, whatever, it's always one lone guy that's somehow deranged because that hopefully ends it, right? I was watching the History Channel, and I frankly was, like I often do when I'm in a hotel room or something, I'll just channel switch for 15 minutes over before going to bed, just to see what's going on, get some news and just see what's going on. And I couldn't turn it off, because they have apparently, I didn't get a chance to see they apparently have a 5 one-hour series on just the men who killed John F. Kennedy. And they have, I have quite a library on that, because I was interested in that way back at one time. I'm astonished with the evidence that has come up. They actually have a picture of the gunman on the grassy knoll. And the point, and without getting into all that here, the point is, there's another case where all the evidence makes it clear it wasn't a lone guy. It may not have been even Lee Harvey Oswald, except as a patsy. Anyway, the point is that we have this affinity for a conspiracy myth. And whenever we have a hijacking or an act of terrorism, we always somehow are given this impression that, well, that's some kooks that are just extremists and doing this because they're off the rocker or something. And what we, I think, have to face the reality, there's no way they can ever convince us that the events of September 11th were not a well-planned, complicated program of professionals that had several years in the training of it and the planning of it and the coordination of it. In fact, there's parts of it that we're still discovering, and there's more to come. So it's not like we need to understand that this is not this is a highly unified, knowledgeable, committed group that are implementing these programs. And I think we know enough about it today to realize, from our point of view, that it's driven by a satanic agenda. You always know the source of it by the fruits. And when you see the subjugation of those countries, when you see the way they treat their own people, when you see the values that they really embrace, you begin to realize that this is from the Prince of Darkness. But don't be confused that these are people that are going to be easily turned around. They are committed to what they're doing. Let's talk a little bit more about the technologies available. Obviously, conventional assaults is what we experience, whether they're hijacking or assassinations or the dismal events of September 11th of this year. But let's realize that there's other technologies available to them that are accessible to terrorists. Biochemical weapons, electromagnetic weapons. We'll come back to that. That may be a new one for you. And and believe it or not, nuclear weapons. Well, let's talk about each one of these possibilities, because you're asking what's it going to be like. We're not here to pull our punches. We're not here to alarm. We're here just to try to get a perspective. But let's recognize that the advent of all of these things are also going to impose security issues. And security is a two-edged sword. On the one hand, it's naive to presume that we're going to ever have society in this country like we've had in the past. We had very open, free society, and it's clear that these adversaries are not going to go away. We're not going to get them all. There's going to be imposed for our own security all kinds of constraints. Yes, there will be infringements on our freedoms. Where will that balance be found? No one knows. Some will try to go too far. Some will try to fight it. We know long run, those freedoms come at a very, very high price. That's the heritage that we should hold dear. But that's a whole other issue. Let's just recognize that that is coming. Now, we've talked about conventional assaults. We sort of take that for granted. Guns, knives, whatever. Let's talk about biochemical a little bit. Biochemical terrorism is very available. Sarin, tabun, anthrax, plague, botulin, they're all readily available agents. They're terrible agents for military use because they're hard to control and you can't focus them. There's all kinds of problems with them as a classical military weapon. But they're a dream weapon for a terrorist. You may recall on March 20th of 1995, sarin, which is a nerve gas type of thing, was unleashed in a Tokyo subway. Only 12 were injured. Over 5,500 were, only 12 were killed. 5,500 were injured because they used an impure mixture. If they'd done it right, it could have been far, far worse. They didn't do it properly, it turned out. But this sarin can kill within minutes. It's one of the rare agents that actually can work through your skin, not just obviously inhaled. So contact or inhalation is a typical form. Now, these kinds of techniques, chemical or even biochemical, are far more available and they're less costly than nuclear or some of these more exotic weapons. In fact, if you have a room, a basement, in some basement, 20 feet on a side, and you can stock it with equipment that's not any more complicated than the fermentation equipment you'd have if you're going to make beer, and you have a protein-based culture, a gas mask, and a plastic overgarment, you're in business. Your investment to put this together is probably going to be less than $20,000. And you can start producing agents that can be maliciously used. The reason it's so advantageous for a terrorist is the symptoms from injecting this into a community of some kind can be delayed for many days. Sometimes the symptoms take 2 or 3 days to show up, sometimes a week or two, depending on what agent you're talking about. Which means the perpetrators can get out of there. They can introduce this, say, into a city water supply, and they've got 2 or 3 days to make an exit. Slip away. If it's a biological rather than a chemical one, it's contagious, which means it can spread through the culture.